Well, welcome back to the show. And what's a week on the air without speaking to the independent MHA from Mount Pearl, Southlands, Paul Lane? How are you tonight, sir?
Jonathan, I'm just great. How about yourself?
Not bad at all. I can set my watch to a conversation with you, sir. I always look forward to it. What's on your mind?
Well, there's many things on my mind. I heard you one night talking about the official opposition. They had 7 members that had to share up the duties of being critics for all the departments. We'll try one person trying to do it.
Yeah, it's pretty fascinating.
It's hard to keep on top of it all. But
well, what's interesting, I find, is that parties that have 2 people who are sitting, and I'm referring to, of course, the third party. That would be the New Democrats. They don't address all issues. They pick and choose. I wonder what is the philosophy that you have that you feel the need to address multiple issues from your position as what I call the fourth party?
Well, because there are multiple issues out there that affect multiple people in multiple ways, and I try to take feedback from my constituents and other people throughout the province, and I try to address them all as best I can. Obviously, you can't do it all, and you have to sort of make a running list, and some things will take priority depending on what's happening at the time, but I always try to get back to all the issues as best I can, given the limitations you have in terms of time and so on.
Time is a big resource, and keep on keeping on as far as I'm concerned, and it's too bad that we don't have as many people addressing so many issues, because just because you have limited resources doesn't mean that you have a limited mentality. So, Paul Lane, what are we attacking tonight?
Well, I want to talk about the Building Accessibilities Act and Regulations.
Okay.
And I want to speak to it from 2 angles, 2 suggestions, if you will, I guess, because I hear you talking about all the time. It's great to bring up the problems, but, how do we fix them, or what are some suggestions? So we do have an issue with the Building Accessibilities Act and Regulations here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And when I talk about building accessibility, we're talking about whether it be, from the outside, we're talking about blue zone parking, about having the appropriate number of spaces, having the spaces meeting the regulation in terms of the proper width, being painted, having permanent vertical signage. We're talking about having curb cut downs in front of businesses, so once you get out in your blue zone, you can actually get up onto the curb to get to the building. And we're talking about, once you get to the building, having the doors wide enough, having the handles at the proper heights, or having push buttons and so on.
And the sidewalk cleared, etc.
All those things, okay? And all those things are covered under the Building Accessibilities Act, and it doesn't just apply to people with disabilities, but also, senior citizens. There's some people, obviously, who are born with certain restrictions in terms of mobility, and then there's many people that, as they age, and we have an aging population, that mobility becomes an issue for them, and there's people who could be in an accident, it could be a temporary thing, could have had surgery or whatever, and they have mobility issues for a period of time. And it's important that everybody have access to public facilities, and certainly, I believe, to private facilities as well, if they're open to the public. The challenge that we have is that under the Building Accessibilities Act, there is an exemption there. And basically what it says is that if a building was constructed prior to December 24th, 1981, as memory serves me, then that building is exempted from being compliant to Accessibility Act and Regulations.
Right.
And I don't know what the thinking was at the time when it was, when this act was created and so on. I would assume that there was some thought around, and I can understand that if you had very old buildings and heritage sites and so on, where it would be, pretty, I won't say impossible, but cost prohibited perhaps to bring everything up to code. I could understand some rationale there. But we have situations, for example, Jonathan, where if you look at a lot of the commercial corridors, whether it be Topsa Road, Kenmount Road, or, Elizabeth Avenue, Torbay Road, all those places, you basically see a bunch of square boxes in terms of a lot of the businesses and buildings that are there. And there's something wrong with the picture, to my mind, when you got a building that might have been constructed after 1981, and it's all up to code, and next door you got a building, only a square box, very easy to put in blue zones, very easy to put up signage, fairly easy to widen the doorway and so on.
Can you provide an example?
And they just don't do it.
What example can you bring to light? Because it's one thing to say this, but I would like to get a, pardon the pun, a concrete example.
Well, Jonathan, I didn't call with the intention to start shaming business owners, to be honest with you. But I would just suggest to you that if you were to take any of the commercial corridors and go from building to building, you will see discrepancies in terms of some buildings are accessible and other buildings are not accessible. We also see it in restaurants, we see it in bars, we see it in hotels even. And quite frankly, I think that we need to look at this exemption for buildings that are older than 1981. And quite frankly, I think that there should be some sort of, I think that it should be accessible, and unless the owner can show some kind of undue hardship. So in other words, if obviously it's going to be something due to the nature of the building, maybe where it's built, maybe, like in the downtown where everything is built right on the side of the road, and maybe there are old buildings. And
maybe? Come on, what do you mean maybe? Of course, they're old buildings, Paul. They're old, and they're old in places like Mount Pearl as well. I mean,
yes,
to say that listen, accessibility should be universal. That should be universal design, and that is what we are moving towards as new buildings are constructed. But in terms of the buildings that have been around for hundreds of years, what you're saying is frankly impossible.
No, what I'm saying to you, Jonathan, is that if there are buildings where it is impossible, to your point, right? Yep. And there can be demonstrated that there's undue hardship to make it accessible, or it can't be done, that's one scenario. But where you have a square box, basically, on a parking lot where there's tons of parking, very easy to put in blue zones, very easy to put in signage, very easy to widen the doorway, then to simply fall back on the excuse, well, this building was built in 1979, to my mind, doesn't cut it. That's all I'm suggesting.
So I guess when you say square box, what you are inferring are these large strip mall or outdoor parking lots that accommodate multiple businesses. Is that what you mean?
Absolutely. Okay. Some of them might be strip malls, some of them might be standalone buildings and so on, right. Retail outlets and so on. I guess all I'm saying to you, Jonathan, is that to simply say that because the building where the business exists was built in, say, 1979, and it would be very easy to put in blue zones and to put in a door that would be accessible to people, to simply say, oh, I don't have to do that because it was built in 1979, I don't think that's reasonable for people.
A couple of things that we could do, of course, as consumers, we can vote with our wallets. And second, would you provide a solution to us? In your mind, you attack problems, so now let's propose a solution. How about government subsidies for businesses to make their buildings universal in design to the best of their capacity? Should there be a grading scale of accessibility, for example, because not all businesses are able to pay out of pocket for these, I think, necessary and respectful renovations and accommodations.
I think that's certainly something we can look at. I think the regulations, like I said, we should be looking at it from the perspective of undue hardship. And certainly if there is no undue hardship that could be demonstrated there, I think they should have to do it. I think that, what you're suggesting is something else that could be looked at in the form of rents and so on. We do it for other things. We do it for busing, for example. There's a program that just came out today that they announced for taxis with a taxi grant for making taxis and so on accessible, government grant for that. So there's no reason why you couldn't apply. There's no reason why you couldn't apply similar programs to that. The other side of it, Jonathan, besides the government side, is from a business point of view. I think it's important that business owners realize that there are many people in our community that have accessibility issues, and with the aging population, there's going to be many more. So if for example, there are two, I'm just going to say there's two restaurants, okay? One is accessible and one isn't. Well, guess what? They're losing a significant business, perhaps, because there are many people in the community that will not go there and spend money in their restaurant because they can't access their restaurant. And not only an individual, if it was a family of four and one person had an accessibility issue, not only are you losing out on one meal, you're losing out on 4 meals. So I think it's also important for businesses not just from a social responsibility point of view, but also from a business point of view, to realize that the business and potential business that they are losing by not being accessible. And I think it's important we get that message out.
So some of them obviously solve that problem by offering delivery services or other options. I agree with you wholeheartedly, and I think that if you're not stuck in the downtown core or antiquated buildings, you should do stuff. And frankly, we have to go now, but you should go visit Bonavista to see how they are incorporating universal design in their brand new businesses. It's absolutely beautiful. Paul Lane, it's been a real blast speaking with you. I missed you last week. I really did. You were one of the voices that were running around in my head. I was wondering what you were up to. So it's good to hear from you, sir. Until next time.
Absolutely, Jonathan. It's always a pleasure, and we'll chat again soon, I'm sure.
Take care. Bye-bye.
And by the way, Jonathan, this is a good issue. Now you're looking for municipal issues. That's something that municipalities should be.
You're damn right.
Should be an issue as well, to talk about these issues and what towns and cities are doing to make sure their facilities are accessible.
I don't think this has been reviewed.
As well.
Yeah, I don't think this has been reviewed since the early 2000s in terms of government. So I'll talk to the minister responsible about this. Thanks for bringing up the issue, Paul. You have a great night. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good one.
All right.